One of the most exciting things to see in MMA is a knockout. It's thrilling, terrifying, and entertaining, all at the same time. And for some fighters, it's their specialty. And that's why we've compiled a list of the UFC fighters with the most knockout wins. Which fighter has the most number of knockouts? And which UFC icon landed almost 20 punches before his opponent hit the ground? Stay tuned because all this and more is coming right up. Cain Velasquez is a Mexican-American heavyweight who knocked out some of the biggest and toughest fighters to ever compete in the UFC. Most of his knockouts were from ground and pound beatings. He would get on top and control his opponents before pummeling them into submission. He was in a 5-fight win streak after joining the UFC when he knocked out Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira. His performance was so impressive that he was given a shot at the heavyweight title, and the American didn't disappoint. Velasquez took out Brock Lesnar in the first round at UFC 121 to become the champion. He lost the belt in the following fight, but won it back just a year later. His MMA career officially ended after he lost via knockout to current champion Francis Ngannou. But looking back at his record, there's nothing that he didn't achieve. And in terms of finishes, Velasquez finished 10 of his fights with a knockout during his time at the UFC. Now, Michael Bisping. Michael Bisping is known for his commentating and trash talking these days. But back when he was an active fighter, he was still known for his trash talking, but also his knockout power. He racked up 10 knockouts in his time at the UFC, and none more famous than against Luke Rockhold. Bisping had already lost to Rockhold and was out for revenge, and that revenge came sweeter than ever. Bisping caught Rockhold in the first round with a left hand to the chin and pounced on his rival with follow-up punches until Rockhold stopped moving. This was a massive upset against the reigning champion Luke Rockhold and handed Bisping the middleweight championship belt. And there was no love lost between the two in the post-fight press conference. Bisping said to Rockhold, "Have you seen that replay, buddy? Your head was bouncing around like a pinball machine." Bisping defended the belt once again against Dan Henderson, losing to one of the greats, George St. Pierre. For his long contribution to the sport, he was inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame and remains one of the sport's most popular athletes. And now we have Anthony Johnson. Sitting at 11 knockouts is former light heavyweight Anthony Johnson. Johnson inflicted some of the scariest knockouts in UFC history, and he was quick to get them done too. 5 of his 11 knockouts came in the first round. His first fight with the UFC finished in just 13 seconds and is in the top 20 fastest finishes of all time. Johnson's opponent knew the knockout power that he had and tried to take the fight to the ground early, but Johnson was too quick. He fended him off before throwing a flurry of punches and leaving him slumped in the corner of the octagon. Then his head kick against Kevin Burns really put him on the map. A perfectly timed left kick took Burns by surprise and knocked him out cold. By the time Johnson arrived to finish him off, he was already sleeping tightly. He rose the ranks to become the #1 contender in the light heavyweight division, but never felt the belt around his waist. He lost both of his opportunities to clinch it against Daniel Cormier at UFC 187 and then 2 years later at UFC 210. Despite that, Johnson is a feature of any UFC knockout compilation for his unmatched power and speed. You can still catch him fighting for Bellator, where he returned last year coming out of retirement. Coming up, which UFC Fighters Championship reign ended because he was showboating, and who is the all-time knockout king in the UFC, so don't go anywhere. Up next, Vitor Belfort. In his day, Vitor Belfort was one of the most feared fighters in the UFC, and he played a big role in the history of the sport. He had unbelievable striking power and flawless technique. In 2013, he pulled off one of the best knockouts in UFC history with a spinning back kick to Luke Rockhold's jaw. As Rockhold tried to recover on the floor, Belfort was all over him with savage punches to finish him off. Later, when he faced Michael Bisping in 2015, he once again showed off his kicking power and knocked Bisping out with a brutal head kick. But one of his most legendary knockouts was against fellow Brazilian Vanderlei Silva in their home country. The year was 1998, and footage of the fight is pretty grainy, but what is clear is Belfort hitting Silva with a barrage of punches that totally overwhelmed Silva. Belfort hits him with around 20 punches before he finally hits the ground and the referee steps in. It is one of the most iconic finishes from the early days of the UFC. Next, we have Matt Brown. Matt Brown is probably one of the best welterweights to never hold the title. He first entered the UFC through the Ultimate Fighter TV series in 2008, and his first few years had mixed results. But by 2014, he had accumulated a 7-fight win streak, with 6 of those coming via knockout or TKO. From flying knees to vicious knees and punches that knocked fighters out cold, Brown was a finishing specialist. Unfortunately for Brown, he ran into the fierce Robbie Lawler, who refused to go down. After grinding it out for 5 long rounds, Lawler earned the judges' tick of approval, but their battle went down as one of the best in the division, earning Fight of the Night. But for those who think that they might have missed their chance of seeing the mortal, he's still at it. Even though he's 41, he had his most recent fight in March of this year, which he lost by decision. So he won't be in contention for a title anytime soon, but if you want to see one of the best welterweights in the history of the UFC, there still might be a chance. And now Anderson Silva. Any MMA fan has to at least consider Anderson Silva in the GOAT debate. He broke record after record in the UFC, including holding the championship belt for the longest time in history. Silva was deadly from everywhere. The Brazilian was strong on the ground, on his feet, and always seemed to have an answer to his opponent's attacks. Throughout his career, the Spider has built up 23 knockouts, with 11 inside the UFC, and there were no easy fights either. Anderson beat any tough middleweight that was fighting during his time. From Dan Henderson to Forrest Griffin and Vitor Belfort, Silva beat them all. He was unstoppable until he ran into Chris Weidman at UFC 162 and got a little too cocky. While taunting Weidman, Silva pretended to wobble before getting caught by Weidman's punch and eventually getting knocked out. In the rematch, Silva broke his leg in a horrific injury and never recovered his career. But these days, you can catch Silva boxing. His last bout was against fellow UFC graduate Tito Ortiz and ended with Silva knocking Ortiz out. At the age of 47, he has proven that he's definitely still got it. Next up is the big man Derrick Lewis. While he might not be challenging Francis Ngannou or Cyril Gane for the title right now, he does lead them all in one stat that puts him in a league of his own. He loves to pound his chest and celebrate like his nickname, the Black Beast. He has the title for the most knockouts in the history of the UFC. In his 8 years in the organization, Lewis has knocked out 13 of his opponents. Lewis weighs over 265 pounds and uses every ounce of it to generate truly scary knockout power. UFC 229 against Alexander Volkov was a perfect example of Lewis's technique. In the third round, the two heavyweights were starting to get tired, and their movements were slowing down, but Lewis dug deep to find the energy to throw overhand after overhand at his taller opponent. When he caught Volkov, the Russian tumbled to the floor, and after a few finishing punches, it was lights out for Volkov. Or at UFC on Fox 11 against Jack May, he withstood a takedown attempt before turning the table and knocking May out as he lay on the ground helpless. Which UFC knockout artist is your favorite? Do you think anyone will ever break Derrick Lewis's record? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.